Brave warriors, Clifford and Northumberland, come. Make him stand upon this molehill here, that wrought at mountains with outstretched arms, yet parted but the shadow with his hand.
What? Was it you that would be England's king? Was you that revelled in our parliament and made a preachment of your high descent? Where are your mess of sons to back you now? The wanton Edward and the lusty George. And where's that valiant crookback prodigy, Dickie, your boy that with his grumbling voice was wont to cheer his dad in mutinies?
Or, with the rest, where is your darling Rutland? Look, York, I stain this napkin with the blood that valiant Clifford with his rapier's point made issue from the bosom of the boy. And if thine eyes can water for his death, I give thee this to dry thy cheeks withal.
Alas, poor York, but that I hate thee deadly, I should lament thy miserable state. I prithee grieve to make me merry, York.
What? Hath thy fiery heart so parched thine entrails that not a tear can fall for Rutland's death? Why art thou patient, man? Thou shouldst be mad. And I, to make thee mad, do mock thee thus. Stamp, rave, and fret that I may sing and dance.
Thou wouldst be feed, I see, to make me sport. York cannot speak unless he wear a crown. A crown for York, and lords, bow low to him. Hold you his hands whilst I do set it on.
Aye, marry, sir, now looks he like a king.
Aye, this is he that took King Henry's chair, and this is he was his adopted heir.
But how is it that great Plantagenet is crowned so soon and broke his solemn oath?
As I bethink me, you should not be king till our King Henry had shook hands with death.
And will you pale your head in Henry's glory and rob his temples of the diadem now in his life against your holy oath? Oh, 'tis a fault too unpardonable.
Off with the crown, and with the crown his head.
And whilst we breathe, take time to do him dead.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate.
And then he said something about the darling buds of May, but don't worry, you don't have to know it.
'Cause you're listening to Eternal Light. Eternal Light.
Shakespeare for all.
Hello, welcome back to Eternal Lines, a podcast project hosted by the Shakespeare Company at UCLA. I am Violet Morris, and this week I am joined by Magenta Rose Brown.
Hello.
Mary Alex Daniels.
Hi.
And Michael Hackett.
Hello, hello.
To talk about Queen Margaret's Molehill monologue from Henry VI, Part 3. This is the first episode in our Speak the Speech series, where I'm going to invite on a few guests who all do the same piece, and then they'll perform the monologue, and then afterwards we'll chit-chat about the piece and about the character. So what you just heard was a mashup of these three actors' wonderful performances of this monologue, edited by Elizabeth Smith, our sound designer. And before we get into our convo about all things Margaret and molehills, I'm going to give a little bit of context about what is happening in the play up until this point and about Margaret herself. So this monologue is in Henry VI Part 3, which is the last of the Henriad, which is, there's 3 series of plays about a different King Henry. And it's part of Shakespeare's histories, and all of these plays focus on the War of the Roses, which was like a war in England from around like 1455 to 1485, so a little over 100 years before Shakespeare. So it's not something that was happening like while he was alive, but it was still fresh in the minds of Elizabethan England. Queen Margaret is the Queen of England. She is currently married to King Henry VI, but the Duke of York has been leading a campaign to usurp her husband's throne. And her husband, who's kind of a dud, he ends up promising York that instead of his own son, Prince Edward, following him to be king after he dies, he says to York, you and your descendants can follow me once I die. Margaret hears about this and goes off and is so annoyed and is like, you suck. So she ends up taking a bunch of her husband's friends, and they lead a campaign against York to get back the throne, because they're like, no way. And Margaret's like, no way, my kid is going to be king. So they end up overcoming York, and then in Act 1, Scene 4 of Henry VI, Part 3, Margaret delivers this monologue to York while they're on the battlefield, and right after he has been defeated. And this monologue directly precedes York's death. So it's Margaret's last final, like, gloat against him right before she orders his death. Okay, so now the first half of this episode is going to be about, like, each of our relationships to the piece, like how we came across it and why we like it, and what our favorite bits of it are. And then the second half is going to be more talk about Margaret as a lady and as a character. So we'll start. Magenta, how did you come across Margaret? Why did you pick this? Why did you feel it was something that you wanted to get your hands on?
I was given this monologue by one of my coaches as a backup monologue for like college auditions and stuff. And I just like fell in love with it because it's just like, she's just so cool and awesome in this speech, especially. I also did it in Theater 12 when the guy from Lambda came.
That's cool.
That was really fun. Yeah.
And Mary Alex did Lambda, so she knows that guy.
Yes, I know Rodney. He's great. The lecture that he gives on that speech is incredible.
Michael, why did well, I was in the class where you found Margaret, but what was that process like for you?
It was really interesting because I'm not a super like in-depth Shakespeare person. So when it came time in Alex Wright's class to do a Shakespeare monologue, I was kind of like, I kind of wanted a challenge, but something kind of unorthodox. And she actually suggested, you could do a gender swap version of like Queen Margaret's Molehill speech. I said, bet, okay, got you. So I kind of took that and, kind of took it as a challenge, just kind of had a ball with it. I've never really played like, I don't want to say a villain, but like somebody who's like so like savage and so like, I got power over you. So it was just like, it was interesting for me to step into that headspace and just kind of give it a go.
Yeah, that's what I like Margaret, and I think this is a thing in like all of the histories is a lot of the characters, like no one is so discreetly good or bad because they all have like their own ambitions. And what's nice, well, I at least feel this way with Margaret, is like you can really see what's fueling all of this like spite towards him. Mary Alex, what about you? How did you find Margaret?
I also came to Margaret in Alex Wright's class, but I didn't do the speech. I was like first half of college just like terrified of the histories of Shakespeare. I like was very scared to go anywhere near them. And so I kind of copped out and did Phoebe from As You Like It, which is a super fun monologue. But I think everyone's had that moment in acting class where someone's come up and just absolutely like crushed a monologue. And then in your head, you're like, I want to do that monologue. Like, like what play is that from? Like whatever. And so Mila, who's an actor in my class, came up and did Margaret and just absolutely killed it. And I just remember going back to my dorm and was like, I need to read all of the Henry VI series. Like, who's Margaret? Who is this woman? I need to figure out how to do this monologue. So that's kind of my background with the piece. And then I learned it and I've just used it for auditions, worked on it when I was in London to a point that I hated doing it for a while, put it away, worked on it way too much. And now I like brought it back.
And I think what's interesting is all of us were a little too young to play Margaret right now. Like, I don't know. I feel like, at least for us, like we're in like, oh, you're going to get cast more as an ingenue right now than like as the big badass Queen of England. But at least for me, it feels like this was something that I was like, but this is different. Like, this is kind of a wild card of like, there are a lot of women in Shakespeare and a lot of powerful women in Shakespeare, but there's something about Margaret and like how determined she is in this piece that I was like, I don't really have anything like this. that I felt like it was useful to have in my back pocket, you know?
I agree with that because it's like a dramatic, but it's not like a cry, like, what's my husband doing? Oh my God,
it's
I'm
not
so
romantic
upset.
at all.
Monologue. Yeah, so it's dramatic, but it gives you a lot to play with, I think, as an actor in terms of there's so much there in terms of like beat shifts, tactics. I think it's like just an incredible piece for anyone to do. There's just so many ways you could take it.
Okay, so then moving into bits and pieces of the monologue, what are your guys' favorite parts? Michael, I'll start with you. What is your favorite part of this monologue?
Ooh, my favorite part, it's gotta be when she puts the paper crown on him, because it's like at that point she's like doing everything in her power to break him, and it's just like at that point she's like, oh, so you don't want to talk? Cool, bet. Let me get a paper crown. Puts it on his head, and I'm just like, ooh, that's so savage, because like she's like, okay, got you. Now you could talk.
Like, okay, you
talk.
want to be king? Okay,
you wanted to
here
come
go.
from my power. You wanted to come from my throne. So, hey, there you go.
Look,
so
you
I
did
think,
it. Good job.
right. So I think that's got to be my favorite part, because it's just like, ooh, you crazy, you savage.
Magenta.
I think that mine is probably the napkin, because I think that's just like literally like cold-blooded, because it's like, here, take this, it's your son, like, what are you gonna do now? And it's just like so fantastically cruel. I love that like imagery in that moment.
It is. It's so cruel. It's brutal. It's like, here, oh, where are your sons? Here you go. This is going to make you cry. And then he doesn't cry. And then it's like, and that just rubs her the wrong way even more. Mary Alex, thoughts, favorite bits?
I would have to say when she calls Richard Dickey, I think that's just like, and like the just crook-back prodigy Dickey. There's just so many fun like consonants to play with, and obviously his name's not Dickey, it's Richard, but he's like kind of like the black sheep of the sons, you know what I mean? And I just think it'd probably be that, or like the valiant Clifford with his rapier's point. I just think because like Margaret's kind of having like a little like side affair with Clifford, that I just take that as a dick joke. I just think of it like that. But which I think is like a cool double entendre, which is not necessarily maybe going through Margaret's head at that moment, but I just think Shakespeare had a little like giggle when he was writing that like specific line down. Yeah, probably those two.
Yeah, also because that like the Dicky your boy kind of alludes to the fact that like we're gonna see Margaret and Richard interact in Richard III, which is a whole nother scenario, and that's like it's like still Margaret, but it's like Margaret after she's been through a lot more than she's been through in this play. And it's not just like her pride that's been wounded in Richard III. It's like, oh, spoilers, you killed my husband and son. So now it's like her anger is different in that play, which I think is really cool. Also, go listen to Richard III on Spotify. Shakespeare Company did it. Yeah. My favorite bit of this monologue, I think, is the "Now looks he like a king. Aye, this was he that took King Henry's share, and this was he." I love the anaphora and the repetition of both the like I blank, but the this was he and this was he, and I love the fact that she like doubles down into that. And I think like repetition in this monologue is really cool. Also at the end with the 2-2 unpardonable. And I think that was also very interesting in watching all of you guys do the monologue, is how you approach the 2-2 unpardonable. Because I think the first time I started doing this piece, that was something that like kind of threw me for a loop. Is I was like, how do I make that like where is that repetition coming from, and how do I justify the fact that she goes 2-2? Like, it was hard for me, but so it was very cool to watch you all do it.
And the little rhyming couplet at the end.
I know.
Incredible.
So
Because I think she thinks that's it. It's like, he's done, like, kill him. And then he comes back with this, like, crazy, also a really good monologue. Like, She-Wolf of France fucking just tears her apart.
Yeah, no,
which is
it's like Margaret thinks, haha, I did it. Mic drop. I'm done. And then York comes back and is like, no, we're not done. And then she's just like, okay. And then, like, he gets in those 2 great chunks of text where he's like, you're a disservice to your set. Like, how can you be called a woman if you're behaving like this? And he, like, gets Northumberland and Clifford to tear up. And then Margaret's like, okay, you're dead. Bye.
Oh, she was hurt.
Yeah. Margaret, when she's doing this monologue, she's on the battlefield. So, like, she's surrounded by a lot of her army. And, like, obviously Clifford and Northumberland are there. How much of it do you think is for York, and how much of it is for everyone around her?
I think there's, like, definitely a good deal of it that's, like, for those around her, but also just, like, more for herself, I feel like for her own, like, self-satisfaction and, like, you know, and, like, she does all these things, and it's, like, yeah, it's to hurt him, but it's because it makes her feel, like, good and, like, empowered.
I think, like, I totally agree with what Magenta said. And I think something that I didn't realize that could be a part of this scene is that there's certain versions of this play where Edward, Margaret's son, is in the scene. And, like, it's his, like, paper crown, like, that gets taken off his head. Like, she takes it off his head and puts it on York. And I saw a production where they did that. And I'm like, that kind of, I don't know, that... for me, it, like, changes the context of the scene. Because, yeah, it's like she's doing it for York. She's doing it for everyone. But then I think there's also a part of her that's, like, showing Edward, this is what your dad should be leading like. So when you get the crown and when you replace him, this is what you need to do. I'm going to lead by example because your dad isn't doing that. Because obviously at that point she doesn't know that he isn't going to succeed. But... yeah, I think that's interesting. And I don't know if, like, I would necessarily make that choice to play it in the monologue. It's just different doing this as a monologue standalone thing rather than having, like, the whole scene to contextualize it, you know? So it's interesting, like, what choices can be, like, altered or different routes that you can take if it's just a standalone.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think, you know, she's trying to showcase her power in front of this army that's around her because, again, she is a woman in power, and back then that was very rare. But so she kind of, like, took that and was like, okay, I'm gonna show y'all how somebody should be running everything. And it's like when York is, like, not really budging, I feel like that kind of, like, gets at her because it's like, I'm trying to make you feel pain. I killed your son. You are defeated and you're not doing anything. So that's kind of making her, like, I feel like that would make her, like, paranoid because, like, she's trying to, you know, show this army that I am capable of ruling you guys. I can be everything that Henry is supposed to be. But I feel like she has a bit of trouble with that because she's not given as much of a reaction as she herself intended.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Eternal Lines. We've got more coming at you in a moment, but I wanted to take a second to shout out some people and projects to keep an eye out for. Shakespeare Company is currently in the process of putting together a virtual evening of Shakespeare. So if you have a monologue you might want to film or get featured as a part of that, go ahead and reach out to us. We are at Bruin Bard on most platforms. And then if you want to keep up with our wonderfully talented guests from this episode, all of their Instagram handles and stuff are in the description of this episode, but they are also involved in projects this quarter that are very cool. Mary Alex is in The Right Choice, which is being produced as a part of TFT's New Works Festival this quarter, which performs December 12th. And Michael Hackett is going to be a part of Dichotomy, which is a dance piece directed by Wanya Yoakum, which discusses the juxtapositions between race, gender, sexuality, and identity. And that is slated to premiere sometime in mid to late December. Furthermore, Michael's music is currently streaming on all platforms, so search Shady Sunshine by Javon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and keep listening for more Margaret. What do you guys think, like, if everything had gone to plan, like, what was Margaret's best case scenario here? Like, what reaction from York did she want?
I think that she would, like, gloat a little bit longer and then have, like, Clifford and Northumberland grab him, drag him screaming and crying through the whole, like, fucking English army so that everyone can see that she made him cry, you know? Like, hold him up on the molehill, like, fucking look, like, York's crying, like, little baby, and then, like, kill him. But obviously... So I think she's, like, trying to poke the bear, like, a little bit more as it goes on. And then obviously he doesn't ever react, which I think, I mean, it's up to the actor, I think, to make the choice of how that affects her. But I think that she just gets so worked up to a point that she kind of like breaks a little bit. I think she the mask of like the calm, sly, confident queen that has it under control breaks a little bit, to the point where then she, has that last couplet where she's like, okay, he's not breaking, just kill him at this point.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think the break happens?
Oh, I think that there's a lot.
I do think that it's a gradual...
the eye. Yeah. I think it's a gradual, and I think like seeing him with the paper crown on his head and he's still not like breaking, because I agree with what you said about the repetition with the eye, and it's just so good, because I think that's how a lot of like contemporary people might react in that situation as well. It seems very natural, rolls off the mental gears as an actor really, I think, easily, because it just makes sense to transition into that. It's like you don't have to think about making the transition so much, because there's an action with it, with the crown, being able to like clearly see that as an actor. And then I think that's a very natural human response to kind of then like, you haven't gotten your way so much. So I think it's just like obviously well written. But
yeah, I think there's something about that last chunk of text that it's just like it, just the ball gets rolling, and then it keeps going and going and going and going and going until cut his head off. He's done. And I think Margaret, maybe loses a little bit of her plan towards the end, and it's really just the pure, I'm just so angry coming out.
Yeah, I think that like especially in the second half, it's like a lot of just like it's like the anger meeting like the wheels spinning in her brain of like, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working? Why am I not able to do this? Why can't I make him like scream in pain? And like the intersection of that.
Mm-hmm. I think what she wanted to do, she wanted to, being a woman in power, she wanted to kind of see a man like submit to her, like be like, I'm doing all this shit to piss you off, but you're not budging. Like I feel like she wanted him to have a reaction to his son dying. Like that's his son. So she's like kind of expecting that to kind of click in his mind, but it doesn't. And so I feel like it's like her pride starts getting to her, and she just starts getting more and more like pissed off, because it's like you're not reacting the way I want you to. So now I have to keep poking you and poking you and poking you and poking you. And I think she kind of like tires out because of it. So she's just like, kill him, whatever.
I think this is like her frustration with York maybe ties into her frustration with Henry, with her husband. And I think even what you were saying of like, this is your son, why don't you care? I think maybe there's a little bit of that in like with her husband of like, why don't you care that you're like you're giving up your son's right to rule?
Right, because York was supposed to come through and like kind of rule things, and because I feel like for her, like she already didn't want that, because she's like, I'm in power. I'm not gonna let a nobody come in and take my spot.
Yeah.
So and Henry's not really he's not really budging either. So it's like she kind of has to take all this responsibility onto herself. She's like, fine, I'll do it myself, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also it's very much her coming from a position of like, I'm the queen, but like if she was like a man, or like if she could have like had that power in that time, like she could have like ruled them all, and like it's like her angers and her like the feelings inside of her of like her annoyances with these men, and like the fact that like her husband like is not taking power and is not like letting their sons like have like the heir, and like York wanting it, and like her just, if she had it, like she could just go all out, but like since she can't, it's like tying her brain.
That knowledge of like, if it was just me, it'd be so different.
Yeah.
And I think like another thing that ties into it too is that she doesn't come from like English royal blood, you know? It's like Suffolk put her in this place to be able to like marry Henry in the first part. It's like she's not even in the first part of Henry VI, and then she like comes in at the end and just like overturns everything. But so I think that's like another layer of, obviously she's like a woman, and that's like a big hurdle to jump in terms of having to prove herself. But then I think that it's the other thing, if she doesn't have any English royal blood in her, and Henry is kind of her one chance, and then with the birth of Edward, he is like the one that her blood is in him, you know, like her line can continue and be royal and have this class and this status that I think she's also trying to gain too. So I think she's trying to prove herself in that way and kind of also like bump up. And she, you know, it's a mother. She obviously wants her kid to have the best for her kid. Yeah. And I think that she thinks the best is for him to be king, obviously.
Yeah, there's a great monologue in part 2 of Henry VI that she says to her husband. It's like, the ocean and the storm didn't kill me on that trip because they knew once I got here, you would kill me. Like, you would be my downfall, and you would, like, you're worse than any storm I could have endured. And it's just, like, I think there's something to be said about, like, yeah, like, she isn't from here, and she's stuck here, like, with this husband who's not putting in the effort that she wants. And she kind of feels trapped by that. And then I think also it's interesting if you look at Margaret, like, into Richard III, of, like, now Edward and Henry are both gone. And she's there, and, like, she, like, sets all these curses on everyone, which is so cool. You should listen to Richard. But like, it's, like, just her. And, like, yes, she was Queen of England, but now, like, the people that were tying her to England are gone. She's just this woman here with all of this anger and rage and, like, and grief.
Margaret and Richard, like, even just within this play are really interesting, because I have another monologue that I do from Henry VI Part 3 that's, like, a Richard monologue. That's right after he kills Henry. And so, like, looking at, like, this monologue versus, like, that monologue, and, like, the similarities and differences, like, between them are really cool, because they're both, like, at least trying to be like, look at me, like, look at how great I am, like, blood and death upon you. But it's like Richard, like, just did it, and she's, like, about to do it. So, like, Richard's is a lot more like, I am, like, the scourge of evil, and, like, you must fight me. And hers is more like, there's more inside of her of, like, I want to be that, I am trying to be that, I am trying to show you that I am being that, but yet somehow it's not working. Why? Yeah. And I think that, like, those parallels between, like, this one here and then, like, that one from Richard, like, towards the end are just, like, so interesting, especially, like, going into Richard III.
Ooh, yeah.
When the Lambda guy, like, came to Theater 12 and talked about this monologue, he mentioned something that, like, I didn't know before he, like, told me. And, like, in York's, like, second speech, like, right before he actually gets killed, like, after she does this, he says, like, my soul to heaven, which, like, is just, like, so cool. And he, like, explained that it's like, oh, like, by him crying out to heaven before he gets killed, it's like him asking for mercy from God, so, like, his soul will go to heaven. And so, like, he brought up the point of, like, did she really win even though she killed him, because his soul is going to heaven and not to hell? Yeah. Which was just super interesting to think about.
That's deep.
And that'd be so frustrating.
Yeah.
Of, like, I beat the guy, my army beat the guy, but then at the end of the day, he still goes to heaven and he's fine.
And all that's doing is making her more and more mad.
Yeah. Well, and then his son, you know, kills her whole family. So, does she really win? Maybe not.
I know, who really wins at the end of, like, all of these plays, you know?
Yeah.
It's like,
especially
who's left, really? Yeah. It's just a bloodbath, especially Richard III.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Eternal Lines, and thank you to our guests for joining me and letting me pick your brains. You can keep up with the Shakespeare Company at UCLA on social media and our website, bruinbard.com, and keep an eye out for more from the Eternal Lines team. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Eternal Lines is a podcast project hosted by Violet Morris with sound design by Elizabeth Smith and intro music by Kay Sybil with a little bit of help from Jacob Cherry. Thanks so much.